Well, you know, FDR had his fireside chats, and Gordy Little and Calvin Castine have their Ron Venne chats. It's getting to be a customary thing on Tuesdays to come over here to Bailey Avenue, 72 Bailey Avenue, and sit at this now very familiar kitchen table and talk about the old days. Is there anyone breathing or viewing this program out in the big bad world who doesn't know the tremendous interest that Calvin and I have in history in the North Country? If you don't, you will. If you're a first-time viewer of our little corner, we welcome you. If you're a long-term fan, we welcome you back. This is number 5 in the current series of Ron Venne get-togethers, tete-a-tetes, if you will, around the kitchen table here at Bailey Avenue, and with very good reason. It is seldom that we meet somebody who is so colorful and interesting and talented. And we've decided to chronicle this man's efforts over the last several years. It's impossible for us to fathom his entire mind because he is so brilliant and creative. We've given you hints of some of the things he's done, but most significant, and the topic, the primary focus of this series of programs is pictures. Everybody loves to look at old pictures. The other day, someone is doing a history of the Trudeau family, and my wife's mother was a Trudeau, and on, and we have a wonderful old wicker basket, probably made by Indians out of sweetgrass many years ago, and that thing is probably well over 100 years old. And I took it out of the drawer the other day, and just as a matter of course, every time I take it out of the drawer, I pick it up and I take a whiff, and you can still smell the sweetgrass. It's beautiful. The reason I mention that is because that basket, which is about this big, is filled right to the top with ancient photographs. Tintypes, daguerreotypes, photographs, little teeny tiny photographs from 1910, 1912, very tiny, so you can hardly see the figures. And when I took that out to look for old photographs of the family, I was thinking of Ron Venne, because we got a new computer at my house with a scanner, and that's a whole new deal for me. Yeah. To be able to put the picture in a scanner and focus on one spot, one sign, one tree, one face, whatever it might be, and blow it up. And you haven't done that.
No.
What Ron has done is taken well over 900 of these old photographs and has sometimes made copies of them.
Yeah, made copies.
At the right size. How big are they? 5
by 7.
5 by 7. Then he's tried to go to the spot where that picture was taken all those years ago and take a new picture to show people what it looks like today. Sometimes the same building is there.
Yeah, it's still there.
Sometimes the trees are gone. Sometimes trees are added. Sometimes it's a school parking lot.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And we've done all of those programs up until now looking at these old photographs. We've covered bridges. We've covered some schools, some churches. We covered many of the streets in Plattsburgh. Yeah. And now, what are we going to do today? You always have a new surprise for us, Ron.
Miscellaneous villages, different towns.
Chazy, Rouse's Point, Keysville, Peru, Champlain, Morrisonville, Katyville, Sable Forks, Moores, and Saranac.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we'll get to all of them. He always starts out with a tidbit. He started out by showing me a copy of a little brochure, if you will, a small book about the Hotel Champlain.
Yeah.
We had seen a copy of this with our friend Wayne Miller at the Special Collections.
Yeah.
And we were kidding you about you walking out with it, but you actually got this from a friend, you said?
Yeah, a friend of mine.
What a treasure, because it talks about that beautiful bluff, which happens to be, I think, one of the pinpoints on the face of the earth that the good Lord said, I think I'll make a nice spot right here to create happiness for people in this view over the lake in Vermont and so on. It's just beautiful. Okay, let us begin with the miscellaneous villages and look at some pictures of some areas around Clinton County. Give me the first one and let us take a look. As is customary, we will show you the before picture first, and we'll chat about it. And then we'll show you the now picture, and we'll chat about that and get through as many as we can in our allotted period of time. here is the first. And as we're locking that picture on the screen, Ron, what do we have?
It's Main Street, Shazy, taken in 1910.
Boy, it's hard to see. You know, you don't realize until you really ponder these pictures what in them. I don't know if is that a horse and wagon, or am I?
Yeah, looks like
It
a horse
is,
and wagon.
okay. Galvin's looking at it and he can see. I'm interested in the telegraph poles. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 cross arms on the telegraph poles. Look at all the wires that they carried back in those days. And then when you see the today photograph, first of all, you'll notice that there are poles, different poles, of course, with only one cross arm.
Yeah.
Right? And very often now you'll have telephone lines at one section and the power lines on another section. Well, here's what it looks like today. To see how things are a little bit changed, but you can see, you'd know it was the same street right away, wouldn't you? And in a lot of towns, things have changed so much you couldn't tell. But you look at the church steeple and you look at some of the buildings which still exist and which ones have been moved. And your now photograph was taken in 1996, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure people who are from that area who are viewing this program will say, wow, I didn't know that place had been there that long, and that's the beauty. We paused only momentarily to make sure our tape was working properly, and as you look at this new photograph, we can tell you what some of the buildings are. On the right-hand side, you'll see the Alice T. Minor Museum. Our little corner has been inside that place. As a matter of fact, I think what's going on here was probably inside that place at one juncture before. It's a wonderful old building, which didn't show in the older photograph because it would have been off to the right. In the distance, what was originally a church is now the town hall, right? And you'll find various things inside there, including the court, including the historical museum. We've been in there a few times as we trace the history of some of the Europeans as they came to the North Country. Just to the left of that, behind a building that's also been there for a long time, you'll see a tall gray structure. What is it? Gray Gables. It is now an apartment house owned by a German immigrant from Vermont at the present time, but it was originally built by Minor to house the people who taught at the old Shazy School before it was a central school. And what many of our viewers may not be aware of is that the school is right across the road, and that there still exists under the street and under the ground tunnels, so that the people could go down in Gray Gables and go through the tunnels and go to school underground. Unfortunately, they're blocked off part way now, and I would give my left eye tooth to be able to get down in there and just see what's down there underground. Wouldn't you, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Normally I wouldn't spend so much time on a photograph, but I want to let you know that things do change through the years, and that's what some of those buildings are being used for today. Ah, look at the old cars. This is a great photograph of what?
The Customs House, located on Main Street in Ross's Point. Kept busy during Prohibition era.
I guess it was kept busy during the Prohibition era. And the people who worked for the federal government had to work very hard to catch the people who were running booze across the border, because they had souped up cars. And those souped up cars turned into what were later hot rods.
Hot rods.
And that's where the idea of souping up engines first came about. As these people with these big Packards and 12 and 16 cylinder Cadillacs and Pierce Arrows and Peerlesses would soup up those engines, so they were pretty hot. And in those days, the roads weren't as good as they were today, and a lot of these guys would take back roads to get down through Clinton County, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And I mean, that opens up a whole new series of stories that we've heard, anecdotes from our relatives and friends about how they'd hear them coming at a certain time, and they'd open the barn doors and the cars would fly in there, and they'd unload and go out the back and head down, and eventually the revenuers would come along with their cars or riding horseback up through the hills. It's wonderful. Well, that's the old customs house in Rouse's Point, as you can easily see. And, in the new picture today, you can see the building, which has been kept in very fine shape.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what it is today.
It was F.W. Myers.
Oh, what?
It was F.W. Myers, and
Yeah.
now it's,
I know
there's
it keeps
nothing
you-
in there now, is there?
I think it's for sale. It's open for the time.
Okay. A wonderful photograph of the old cars. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Isn't that terrific? You can just hear those old sirens going now, and the chase is on. Oh, boy. You know, there's something, if you're as old as I am, railroad stations hold a very special charm. And every time I see an old train station, I think of my childhood in Thornwood, New York, and as little tiny kids, part of what we did for fun was
Yeah.
to go down to the train station and watch the rich people come in on the train. We were extremely poor. To see people with tweed overcoats and those wonderful hats they wore, and the women with nice dresses that they come in from working in New York City out to was the far suburbs, about 20 miles from New York City, was a big deal. And spending time in the old train stations. And look at those uniforms of the day. Look at the vests and the collars and the hats and derby hats and various people in various kinds of dress. We don't have any idea what function that would have been
No.
that drew those people together, or whether they just were the people that worked in the train station that day. But here is what the train station looks like today. What, have I got the right picture?
Yeah.
And nothing is being done with that building, as I don't think today, right?
Yeah, it's hoping to preserve it.
They're hoping to preserve it, and it looks like the integrity of the actual structure is intact. But that was being used right up until fairly recent years.
Within the last 5
Within the last half a decade, that was being used. And for those people, once again, who are regular viewers of this program and its predecessor, What's Going On Here, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about railroads and railroad history, because you can't talk about North Country history without talking about the railroads. The
Yeah.
two are combined. You can't talk about mining without talking about. You can't talk about commerce with travel. You can't talk about tourism. Now we got again another series of pictures, right?
Right.
Taken of the same train station,
Yeah, 1962.
1962. And while you're looking at that, then Calvin's, you see that the crossing arms are there in the original photograph in 1962. The D&H train is there. I don't know who's walking across the road, but some of our viewers can probably recognize their uncle or their cousin or their brother. And again, the today photograph, just to refresh your memory as to what's transpired just over the last 38 years, right? Oh, these are terrific. All right, moving right along. Oh, boy. This is a building that's very familiar to me, and these photographs do bring back a flood of memories. Although I don't remember this building looking like that, I do remember it back in the early 60s. This was built in the 1890s. What was it called then?
Hotel Windsor. Later the Saxony in Ross's Point.
Yeah, later the Saxon. It was, in those days, called an elegant summer resort, with good reason. It's a grand hotel, isn't it? 4 stories, lots of people sitting around enjoying themselves. You can get, again, in the lower left-hand corner, see a blurry horse and carriage, but people were just having a good grand old time with the balcony, and things were humming up there. I mean,
Yeah.
that was and is a beautiful spot in the
Yeah.
face of the earth and a nice village. But it became the Saxony, and I can remember my first connection with it. You can see what it looks like today, was when some brothers bought it and ran a bar room in there and had some pretty good rock and roll bands and acts in the 1960s and 70s. Calvin might remember it too.
Triads.
The Triads were there.
Yeah.
Very famous group in this area called the Triads, and it was a decent place to visit on on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Boy, things sure have changed. That building was for sale for a long time. I don't think there are any apartments or anything in there right now, are there? I'm not positive, but I doubt it.
Just the owner.
And I'm not sure that
It's just Mark, as far as I know, just the owner, Mark
just
Chapman.
the owner, Mark Chapman, is in there now. Oh, boy. We zip around. We're faster than a speeding bullet here today. So let's go to the other end of the world and head down into Keysville, the village. This is before what?
Before the fire in 1882.
There, we mentioned before, and we should mention again, that a lot of the villages, towns, and cities in the North Country were decimated by fire back in the 1880s. There were a lot of wooden structures. Everybody had burned, they didn't burn fuel oil back in those days. They all burned wood and coal.
Yeah.
And fire departments weren't as well equipped to fight fires back
Yeah.
in those days. There wasn't always water available, and so there were some tragic fires. But that was a pretty busy community back in the 1800s, and I want to show you what it looks like today. You could drive down the street and it would look just about like that
Yeah.
this afternoon. We're in the middle of a flood season.
Yeah.
Our spring arrived a little bit early in the North Country as we are recording this on leap year day, February 29th, 2000. And Calvin was telling me about those people who won't be celebrating what? Their 100th?
97?
97 through
103.
through 103, because this hasn't happened in a year that ends in, it only happens in years that end in zeros, right?
Every 400 years.
Every 400 years. So to use the analogy, he said before Samuel de Champlain came here is the last time
Yeah.
that happened. So that's rather significant for you people who are celebrating birthdays today on February 29th. So Keysville, very interesting place. Got some historic bridges there. And that's what it looked like after the fire. All right, we're going to move down to a slightly different location in the village of Keysville. And the interesting part of all of this is that the face of the street looks pretty much the same today as it did then. What street are we on?
That's Front Street.
Front Street,
Yeah,
and a picture that was taken 90 years ago, right?
Yeah, 1910.
1910. And those people who are familiar with that wide street realize by looking at it that it was that wide way back then. There were a lot more poles, as we
Yeah.
just mentioned before, and things to look at. The church is still there and still being used as a church. Most of the buildings have changed, that is, the occupants of the buildings have changed. And across the road, where that beautiful big tree is in the initial photograph, is what's now the Grand Union parking lot,
Yeah.
right? I hope that our viewers find it as interesting as we do to compare the before and after, the then and now pictures of the communities in which they live and visit.
Yeah.
For me, it's utterly fascinating. Now, this is we're going to move back a little bit closer to us by
Yeah.
going to Peru now. And you're going to see drastic change between the then and now. This is right in the middle of Peru in the early 1900s, right, Ron?
That's right.
I don't know what that building would have been used for back then that shows in the photograph. But it was a busy store. It's difficult for me to read the print there. I suppose that under certain conditions we'd be able to do that. But these are two stores that were side by side right at that location, and you can see still the roads
Yeah.
are roughly the same. In
They're the
other
same.
words, the roads are running the same track. This original photograph was obviously taken in the winter time. And in the mid right-hand part of your picture, you can see an ancient automobile. See the skinny tire and see the spare tire on the side sticking out? I'm sure that's the rear end of a Model T Ford,
Yeah,
maybe.
probably.
Now, here's what Peru looks like today. They have, across the intersection, you will see a delightful gazebo that's been built in the last few years, and at various times throughout the year, right next to the river. They have some very nice events down there. And that's the intersection of Route 22B and Route 22 in Peru, right?
Right.
All right, good, good photographs. And let's move along to another location. Boy, I'll tell you, some other drastic changes have taken place in Peru. It's one of those small communities where a lot of the old buildings are just plain gone. What
Yeah.
street is this?
This is Peru on Elm Street, taken in the 50s.
The first photograph was taken in the 50s. Oh boy. We can identify a lot of those cars. Some of them were brand new. That looks like that one in the front looks like about a 1953 Ford. I can see Chevys and Fords and some old cars. That one way up near the end looks like about a 1939 Chevy Coupe near the top side. And I don't know what that second car in, but that would date into about 1946 or 1947. It's just fun to look. There's where the Grand Union was, right?
Yeah.
And you can see the pharmacy and the various stores and locations, but there isn't much left
much
of
now.
that today as you take a look on Elm Street today in Peru and see what today's vantage point looks like right there. And I'm sure a lot of the people who are in their 50s and 60s, 70s and older remember that exact scene from that first photograph back in the 1950s. Now we're talking a cold weather picture, but a beautiful, a charming North Country photograph as we zip you back across Clinton County and take you back to Champlain. Now, what are we talking about? 19 what?
1908.
The horse-drawn sleigh in the wintertime, 1908, a beautiful photograph. As you look around, you will see that some of the buildings are still in existence. That house up in the background, buildings still exist. The bridge is very, very different today, but that shows somebody crossing the bridge and another sleigh coming up from the lower right-hand side. And boy, it looked like they're going right. It looked like there's one little track right up the middle of the snow, right? Today, you have a look, as you know, by our former program of bridges, which we actually recorded what would have been a week ago. A lot of the bridges, most of the old bridges are changed. Some of the old bridges still exist but are closed. But this is the way that scene looked again in 1996 when Ron started his little odyssey around the city of Plattsburgh and Clinton County to show us before and after.
Yeah.
Today, it looks like ice all around there.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
it's
oh, it
flooding
does.
application Today.
Yeah, Calvin spent the last couple of days with his camera up there taking about a half an hour's worth of photographs. It's not something that he enjoys doing because it's getting close to his home turf up there, but you have trekked through some mighty terrible weather right in that exact vicinity, haven't you, over the last few years? More times than you want to admit. As I sat in my living room last night praying that the ice wouldn't jam behind my house, I was thinking about all through the years and what the terrible times we've been through. In the good times, sometimes we tend to forget what things were like. And so far, the ice is pretty good at our house. Well, well, well. Where are we now? This is the one we're supposed to be looking about?
That's the other one.
Oh, the other side.
That one.
Okay. Let's take a look here. Champlain again.
Champlain.
What church is that?
St. Mary's Catholic Church in Champlain, New York, has appeared in 1880.
Wow, 120 years ago. I bet you that picture wasn't taken on leap year day in 1880 either, was it, huh? Far different. As a matter of fact, the building next door is there, right? But the church is gone.
Yeah.
Oh, very, very interesting. And I wonder when the new church was built.
I don't know.
Does Calvin know? Does anybody know? Somebody could tell us who's viewing this, and I'm sure. And we stopped our camera just for a moment to do a little research to think about this. Calvin is very familiar with this area, of course. We wanted to make sure we were viewing the same location, and we have come to the conclusion that we are. In the large building to the right center of the older photograph is now the rectory, Probably was even back then, in the 1800s. The building is essentially the same as you can see, with porches changed, of course. The church is moved, as you'll be able to see in the newer photograph, and it looks like it's sprouting from the top of that compact automobile, or that SUV in front of the church, is a monument, which is a monument to Samuel de Champlain, as Calvin tells me. And they've just done a history of the church. We don't know when the original church was taken down, but you can see that it's moved into slightly down the street, so it's hard to get perspective, because the size of the rectory, you're standing probably farther away than the original photographer was.
Yeah.
The original photographer may have been standing right in the middle of the road. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
And cameras being so different, it's hard to get exactly the same size of the building in both photographs, even though the size of the photograph is the same.
Yeah.
Those are the technical aspects involved. Ron, pardon me, has worked very hard to get as close as he could to the exact spot. But anyway, that's what it was. Now we're going to flip it over, and we're going to get into my bailiwick. And things that look extremely familiar to me, but I certainly have never seen Mason Street in Morrisonville looking as it did right here. This person that took the picture was standing on Mason Street in Morrisonville, looking in an almost northerly direction. And you say this girl is how old? 6 years old.
6 years old.
Hildred Rabidou.
Yeah.
Taken in August of 1942. How did you know who was in the picture?
Because that's one of my cousins.
Well, that you should know.
Yeah.
Does she still live in the area?
Yeah, she lives on, I can't think of the road now. It's up in near Saranac area where she lives.
Oh, okay. Well, it's difficult with so many huge trees and bushes to even tell you're standing in the same spot.
Yeah.
But we're going to take your word for it, because this is the picture that you took recently, within the last few years, to show you what the street looks like today. It is amazing to me how much, the road is the same spot.
Yeah.
By then, in the 40s, I can't tell if that was tarmac, that original one. Can you?
I think my mother said it was dirt road then.
It looked like a dirt road. Only the main roads, even well up into the 40s, were tarmac.
You should have got his cousin back there to stand in that same spot.
Yeah, you should have had her stand right there. Boy, that would have been something had you been able to do that, huh?
I should be older now.
Yeah, some of the buildings still exist, but with the trees and a different time of the year, actually, that you took the photograph, it's difficult to tell. If we continue to spend that much time on each photograph, we're going to be doing chapters 12 and 13 and 14, but I think it's important not to rush through. Oh my. Oh, this is so neat. This proves something that I've said several times on this program, because I knew it to be true. The Morrisonville Post Office was located right there on Main Street, right next to what is now the Green Bridge. This is what it looked like in 1942, and this is roughly what it looked like when I moved into that area in the 1960s, without that little cupola over the top there, and without that side porch. There have been a lot of things in that building, and I think we've mentioned it on this program, between a country store and a barber shop and who knows what all. This is right beyond that house today, and I'll show you the modern view that was taken in 1997. By the way, it's now all apartments. Right just beyond that, between there and the riverbank, is a tiny road that goes back to the home of Beardsley Van Etten, who, Beardsley, very interesting, colorful person, he and his wife, and they're the ones that started cable television. If it hadn't been for Van, as we call him, and his wife, we might not be viewing this today on your local Falcon television stations, or wherever you happen to see them around the northern tier or elsewhere in the North Country, because he started Dimension Cable TV. And on his property way up on the hill there was this giant tower. I don't know how long it was. Ultimately, I believe and he'll correct me, I'm sure if I'm wrong, but I think he sold Dimension Cable TV to the Wilmetco Coca-Cola Bottling Company. And it's gone through several hands. As a matter of fact, as we record this, in early 2000, it's undergoing a change again under new ownership. All right, flip it over, and you will see a photograph of the old, what?
Morrisonville Fire Department, or fire station, taken in 1942.
1942. A lot of these pictures were taken in 1942. Is this off the same roll of film, or?
Yeah, this is something that my uncle took, because I had an uncle who lived in Morrisonville.
Isn't it a quaint-looking fire station?
Yeah.
It was destroyed by fire in the 1950s. You couldn't hold too many trucks in there at that time. And I'm sure some of the old-timers who are still in that fire department can remember that the open trucks, boy, it was cold to go to a fire in the wintertime. And I should mention that the fire districts have been changed a great deal over the years, and the Morrisonville Fire District in 1942 was far-reaching.
Yeah.
Morrisonville firemen would have to get in that old truck in the middle of the winter and head all the way to Cumberland Head, for example, and up to Saranac and in far-reaching places. So things were a little bit different now, and those old guys can tell you stories that you wouldn't believe about old fires and accidents, and amazing. It's an energetic and active group, and I spent a lot of time in my careers promoting volunteer firemen in the North Country. This, by the way, is what the fire station looked like in 1997, 3 years ago. It's essentially the same, although you'll see a few things change. There's a memorial out in the front. That whole aspect has changed quite a bit. Houses have been removed from both sides over the years. There was a house between the fire station and me that was destroyed. They actually tore it down to enlarge that parking lot when they expanded the fire station. And also the property on the right-hand side. You can see how close the house was over there, which is now removed. Oh boy, we're having fun. It's fun when it gets into your hometown. You saw how excited Calvin got when we got up to the Champlain Rouse's Point area. Oh my. This is a great picture. I've never seen this exact picture before and didn't know you had this. This was called the William H. Myers block on Main Street, Morrisonville. I didn't know it was called the William H. Myers block. That's complete and utter news to me. I know most of the things it's been through the years. I know that it was a store, a general store in the late 1800s and early 1900s, operated by the late Fred Pierce, because his son Roy Pierce, who stayed in the house of his birth and lived there until he was well up into his 90s across the road, told me stories and showed me old photographs of what it looked like. And then, as I said before, it became funeral homes for several times. A number of businesses were held in there, and ultimately it became one of Clyde Rabidoux's first checkout convenience stores. And after that became a Sugar Creek, and that's what it was when you saw it in 1997. Sugar Creek moved out, and now it's being rehabilitated, as we show you the new photograph from 1997, being rehabilitated now and will become a NASCAR memorabilia store. And I should mention, I guess to be correct in terms of my connection with the building, that this was and may still be one of the most haunted buildings I have ever seen in northern New York. And those who are interested in my ghost stories can ask me personally about all the strange things that have happened in and around that building.
Red Dashno?
No, Red Dashno store was
down farther.
way farther up the road across the intersection of Emery Street. But that was quite a building. Oh boy. I love these old photographs of the Morrisonville School. This is one of hundreds that exist because so many people alive today graduated from the old Morrisonville School. And this is what it looked like in a formal portrait. You said when?
Late 19th century.
So this would be back in the late 1800s. And I doubt if anybody's still alive would be in this picture, but I'm sure their relatives are. If you just look at those costumes, you see a most charming bit of Americana. Look to the right-hand side of the picture and look at this little dude standing there. Huh? With his little thing around his neck and his coat on, this little cap. Oh boy, some of these hats the little kids had, boy, they all dressed up for that occasion. And that school was added on to and, was used right up into the 1950s, and then it was ultimately destroyed. There was a tremendous controversy about where the new central school would be located. Many people, including my wife's father, the late Alfred Vaughn, fought to keep it in the general Morrisonville area, and now people viewing this program know where it went to. It ended up at Pickett's Corners up in Saranac. And now this, of course, is St. Alexander's Church. This is my parish, the one that Kay and I go to every Sunday morning at 7:30, and that's where the old school used to be, way back when. That's kind of neat to review.
There's the school.
Oh, now here's another view of the school as it looked in the, 1950s?
1960s.
In the 1960s. I'm not sure when the last class graduated from the school, but you can see that there were at least one major and perhaps two large additions that were made to that school building from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the now picture of the school, of the church, St. Alexander's Church, again today, so you can get the comparison.
You forgot one.
Oh, I flip it over because next to the church, next to where St. Alexander's Church is, now is the parish, where, the parish house.
Yeah, that was where the church used to be.
And this is where the old church used to be. Just to give you an idea, as you turn the corner and go up on Church Street, this is the old St. Alexander's Church. And there are many, many people still alive in the area, and people who used to live here who remember that church, attending that church, and where it was located. And, oh boy, and that would have been when was that picture taken? We don't know, do we?
I don't know. I think
I'm guessing by the looks of it, it probably was the 1940s, the 1930s or 1940s. I don't think it was much newer than that, although it could possibly be. But it's far different now. The house is still there, but the church is gone, and this is what it looks like today, or whenever you took this picture. In the 1990s, right?
Yeah.
1997, 429.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Oh boy, another great spot. This evokes a tremendous amount of memories. A short while back, I did a historic walking tour for a historical occasion in Morrisonville, and the stories that were told about the former Fred Trombley store at the corner of River Street and Mason Street are truly amazing. Some of them are beyond the scope of this family television show, but suffice it to say, there are some people still alive in that area who learned about the demon rum in and around the property of the old Fred Trombley store. The corner of River and Mason Street. Wow, I've never seen that photograph. I had to look at it a little while myself because the essence of it is still there. That interesting stone structure still exists today at that corner. And that's what it looks like today. Part of our little community of Morrisonville. Now there are drastic changes. But we're going to have to do a before and after and a really after because the now picture of this next door doesn't look anything like it looks now. But this was way back when on the corner of Emery Street, right?
Right.
The Grange Hall is on the left-hand side, and the Grange Hall was turned into a store and a septic system and a store and the whole thing at a long period of time. But that's where a lot of people spent their time. And the building on the right is, as you said, the former Ray Dajnaw or Red Dajnaw store.
Yeah.
It's about 1940 when it was really thriving. It's gone through many changes. I also wrote the very first ghost story I ever wrote was called Red Dajnaw, the ghost of Red Dajnaw, who has appeared a few times in that building since he died. He was a charming individual, a member of the family, and just a terrific person. Now, in 1998, we'll show you what the corner looked like, to give you an idea how many things had changed by then. And Oral Gagnon's store was gone, but that became a video store by that time. Now, all that's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
You're looking at the now picture, right? The now picture was 2 years ago. That whole corner is gone, the far corner. That video store is gone. That's now going to be the new United States Post Office in Morrisonville, which has moved from a building which would have been in the back out to the front. It isn't finished yet, but it's well underway. There was a long process in trying to determine where it would be.
Yeah.
And that's where it's going to be. It's a large building with a parking lot in the front. And across the corner from that kitty corner is where I live. There's a beautiful large building that was turned into a video store.
Yeah.
These people moved the video store there, and my house is behind that on the river. I thought maybe you were going to surprise me with a picture of my house, but you didn't do that, did you? Okay. This is around the corner down Emery Street and also down Memory Lane, right? And what is this?
Earl Briette Senior Store on Elmore Street in Morrisonville.
On Emery Street. And Henry Dajnaw had a blacksmith shop in there beforehand, and I've had an awful lot of people tell me about taking their teams down there and their horses to be shod way back in the old days. And guess what, folks? Things do change. It's now gone. It's a parking lot. On one side would be the Morrisonville Post Office, and on the other side would be the Knights of Columbus Hall.
Yeah.
On Emery Street in Morrisonville, for those people who are familiar and for those people who are unfamiliar. These are, oh boy, great photographs. I just have to look for a minute because they're just charming. I've seen all these pictures before, but I love to look at them again because it's my hometown. The family of Milton Sutherland lived and had a store, the Sutherland store and home, as you can see in this picture. And there was a horrendous fire. I wonder if that's I can't tell what that wagon is there in front there. It's a little dark, but their family's standing there anyway. And as you can see, it's at the intersection of Church and Emery Streets, and there was a fire that burned the store down in 1928. And things have changed quite a bit over that period of time. That's what the same location looks like today.
Some of these pictures here I got from a cousin of mine.
Oh, you did, huh? From 1998. But it just goes to show you how things have changed,
He
huh?
was a town supervisor of Schuyler Falls.
Yep.
Ray Newell.
Oh, yeah, from Raymond.
Yeah.
Former town supervisor who's now retired from that position as well. As our viewers know, many of these communities, especially along the rivers in the North Country, sprung up because that's where things happened. The logs came down the river. There were various kinds of mills and factories that required the river for water power. And this is a perfect example of what that looked like. This is the old butter factory, located on Main Street in Morrisonville, the old former Conroy butter factory, right?
Right.
And there were a number of mills and factories right in that general vicinity. And And this is what that general area looks like today. These pictures look like they were taken during one of the annual celebrations in
Yeah.
Morrisonville. That's terrific. Okay, and now, oh boy. You saw some photographs last week, I believe, of some of the bridges around
Yeah.
Clinton County, including the Green Bridge in Morrisonville. And
You
you,
gotta turn around.
what?
You gotta,
Oh, I got the wrong side?
no, you got it
Oh,
yourself.
I've got. I'm sorry. It's leap year day. I can't do everything perfect. Are you going to show just one of them or both of them?
I'm gonna show the one with.
The old one?
Yeah.
Okay. We've talked a lot about Army maneuvers, haven't we?
Right.
In this area and what happened. And these are the troops marching east on Main Street. What year? 1939?
1939.
Wow. During the Army maneuvers, and they kind of took over things. And
Yeah.
But you know what? Just as we finally espoused Plattsburgh Air Force Base after the 1950s, it was looked on not as somebody intruding. It was looked on as your friends and neighbors
Yeah.
getting ready to fight what turned out to be another great war that was supposed to be the war that ended all wars. Guess what? It wasn't. But in the background you can see the old bridge, and now in the new photograph you can see the new bridge. And this is roughly what it looks like today or within the last few years. Looking back from the hamlet of Morrisonville. Again, reminding our viewers that that green bridge separates the towns of Plattsburgh and Schuyler Falls. On the far side of the bridge in that photograph would be the town of Plattsburgh, and the near side, the town of Schuyler Falls. Okay. Oh, you got some vehicle pictures.
Yeah, right.
I bet you never made a, did you ever make a copy of one of these vehicles? As you made all your
Yeah.
recreations, have you?
Like half tracks and scout. I think that's a scout car.
It says on your notes, what does that say?
It's an Army It's an Army white M3 scout car, and vehicles coming from Cemetery Road in front of the old post office.
Oh
Near the
boy.
bridge in 1939.
Yep, and you can see where it went up the hill and came back down around. You can see the buildings that existed back then. And that was made by the White Trucking Company, those
Yeah.
vehicles were. And that's very significant in my history because one of my favorite uncles, Harold, it was Uncle Harold Brewer, who lived on Garthwaite Terrace in Maplewood, New Jersey, was a top executive for the White Trucking Company for
Yeah.
many, many, many years. And oh boy, in 1998, you've got a picture of that same area, but I'm zeroing my mind right in on that 1934 Ford.
You know, that's why I waited. I wanted him to come in the frame so I could.
Oh, that's a 1934 Ford four-door. I'm sure it's not the one I owned, but it could be because I owned one that was identical to that. And it was sold and left the area, and all those years I intended to restore it and never quite did. But that's the car that we worked on so hard to restore in the 1950s, at least into running.
That's another one.
Oh, we got tanks and half tracks.
Thanks.
You're getting me all excited here. These are pictures from my youth. What kind of what is this that you're looking at?
It's the M3A1 light tank on Main Street in Morrisonville during Army maneuvers.
Right at the intersection again. And
Yeah.
that's the same time period, 1939.
Yeah.
And that's roughly the same photograph today, just so you can add the perspective once again of the now. But I just wanted you to know that people's fields and apple orchards and the back roads up in up the Norrisville Road all
Yeah.
the way up to what is now Macomb Park was a pretty busy place. And a lot of the people were involved. The kids would take hot tea and coffee and apples and lunches to the ping and things and so on. Whoops, we don't need that one anymore. All right, now let's move up the road to where are we going? To Katyville?
Katyville.
All right, let's go to Katyville, folks. We're taking you on a little trip. What are we looking at?
It's the Katyville General Store. Was built in 1902. and served residents in Cadyville area for 55 years. The store was demolished at Cadyville to clear a right-of-way for the reconstruction of Route 3.
Oh boy, gosh, I remember that, and I had forgotten it completely. But that's one of those places where there's nothing but an open corner now, right?
Yeah.
It's the way it looks, roughly looks today, I guess. Okay, and on the flip side of that, this is another great piece of Clinton County history, this building. And this is the way it looked like pretty much when I first saw it. It's one of the railroad buildings up toward Cadyville. And it was used as a warehouse and I don't know what all, but fortunately the building was retained
Yeah.
and rebuilt and turned into a business called the Wood Grain Unfinished Furniture Store, so that it's still in existence today with a big chair on the top. You see that? That's kind of cool. Okay. Very interesting, as I should tell you, I guess, pausing in a moment, for those people who haven't seen this current series of programs before today, that we are in the kitchen of Ron Venne at 72 Bailey Avenue in Plattsburgh, not far from the Bailey Avenue School and just a very short distance from the old fairgrounds, right behind the house. And what we're doing is looking at then and now photographs. Ron has taken these old photographs, found out what the vantage point of the photographer might have been way back when, and he's taking modern photographs to give us an idea.
Yeah.
I think we're going to Moore's.
No,
No?
also Forks.
Ausable Forks? This first one is Ausable Forks, okay. And what is it?
Main
What-
Street in 1925.
Main Street, Ausable Forks, 1925. Boy, oh boy, some of those old telephone poles looked a little crotchety back in those days. Look at that one on the right-hand side. It's got a bow in it. The one on the left-hand side almost didn't look round. You remember ever trying to climb a telephone pole when you were a little kid? Huh? Did you ever try to do that? You ever look at those guys with their spikes and their belts on and how quick they go up the pole? And you'd get an idea that you could do that, and you had to reach as far as you could reach to reach the first peg. They were metal stepping pegs.
Yeah.
And you try to get up on the pole, and then you were afraid to get up there because you knew darn well you'd be electrocuted or fall, or in any case you'd come up to an untimely end. So my parents would almost always catch me trying to do it, but I have tried to climb a few poles. And you look at today's perspective on that street, and yes, there are some massive changes, but we can see still some of the buildings, can't we?
Yeah.
This is a photograph that Ron took at that same location in 1997. Now, can we go to Moore's
We
now?
can go to Moore's now.
I wanted to go to Moore's ahead of time, but we didn't. Here is, what are we looking at?
The Morris Shirt and Power Company, located on Main Street, 1920s. Now
Wow. And
now it's the
today
same
it's a
location.
little bit different, right?
Yeah.
But you said the bridge is closed, but what the heck would be a shirt and power company? I mean, I've heard of amazing combinations, but the shirt and power company?
They made,
Yeah, you can take the microphone.
If my memory serves me, what they made power for themselves to run their machines, and they ended up making enough power for other people in the community too.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Anyway, well, sometimes we just need to have things like that explained. The bridge is still there, although it's not being used, right?
Right, they closed it.
Closed it, but there's the location where the Shirt and Power Company was way back when. Oh boy, great photographs. Okay, let's move on. Oh, we're still going to be in Moore's, huh? Okay. Only with your approval, though, 'cause
No.
I want to turn the pages right here. So what do we got?
That's the Morris Yard business section on Main Street. And
At Main Street in
Moore's.
Moore's. Look at the old Esso sign. You know what that sign would be worth today? Let me guess. Maybe $800 to $1,000 for that sign today, if you could
Yeah.
find it. You think it's in somebody's backyard somewhere? Look at the old cars. And look, wait a minute, what is that, a Texaco sign down on the corner?
Yeah, it's Texaco.
There's the star. And that's, once again, that's the Grand Union. And you will notice in the now photograph, wow, that little cupola is still on that building.
Hmm.
That is incredible. You would expect over that period of time that that would have been removed and changed, but it's still there. See that little thing that juts out in the front and in the building? That, I don't know how early that last photograph was taken, the early photograph, but probably 1930s.
Yeah, probably the 30s.
Probably 1930s, and then as it looked in 1997. Good look at your hometown. We're going to stick in Moores for a minute. That's another picture taken in the 1930s looking west on Main Street, right, Ron?
That's right.
Okay, can you see it? Oh, that's some great stuff in that photograph. It's fun for old timers to look and see, hey, that was my car, that was my grandfather's car, and you can see what stores. Oh, I see another gas sign. That was Sunoco. In case you didn't know, Sunoco was around back in those days. I think that maybe that same one of those same trees still exists in the now photograph. Because we do have trees that are pretty old around some of the communities that may have survived. Unfortunately, a lot of them were destroyed during the ice storm,
Yeah.
and some of them have bounced back. I know some of the people who have sugar bushes are in the process of trying to get their trees tapped as we record this late in February, but things are not good
No.
because it requires a certain kind of weather
Yeah.
to get maple syrup. So are we still in Moores?
We're
Because
still
I
in
think we
Moores.
still see that same sign again, don't
Yeah.
we? What direction are we looking here?
Looking east.
In the 1930s? And yeah, that seems, oh boy. I don't think that's the 1930s. I would have to guess that that's a
40s?
1949 or 1950 Ford
Yeah, with
Standard right there on the
Yeah.
right-hand side. So I would say that was probably around 1950. Wouldn't you say that was about a 49 or 50 Ford?
Yeah.
Calvin, he's nodding his head. And there's just a slightly different look
Yeah, different.
at the main street, the way it looks today. Well, we're getting a good view of Moores. Wow, now we can go back to the 1930s or early 1940s, and this another one on the main street, east farther up, right?
Yeah, farther up.
A little farther up the road. We can see, boy, I'm trying to read that sign. Is it Star? Can you read that sign on the right-hand side, Calvin, on that store? The STA something? I can't tell what that sign says, but there is a historical marker right in front of it. Well, now we know what it says. It says restaurant. But it looked to me like the RE was separated from the STAR. I'm very easily confused, but it's was a restaurant then, and it is a restaurant now. And once again, let me see, what would that gas sign be? What was it with the flying horse?
Mobile.
Was it mobile? The flying horse?
On the left, it's a Shell station, Shell sign.
Shell sign on the left, that's very familiar with the old-fashioned gas bumping. On the right, though, I can see was that mobile with the horse, or was that
Up the street.
Flying A?
Up the street, that's a mobile.
It is?
Well, I don't know.
With the horse? With the wings? Was that Flying A?
I can't tell if it's a gas sign or not.
It's a gas sign, but I don't know what kind of a gas sign, and somebody's out there screaming at their television set right now, hoping we can hear. But now we know that Star Ron is the Blue Note today in the now picture, and the historical marker, and I don't know what that historical marker said. I wish I could remember. I'd seen it there before it was taken away, but it no longer exists, I don't believe.
Well, that's the,
Take the microphone back.
That's the area where the railroad track crossed, but I would think it would still be crossing at that point, so I don't know what that marker would have said. In the new picture, it's not there anymore.
That's probably said that's where the original Calvin cast iron crossed. Okay. Wow. You're going into the high peaks now. To the place where my wife was born and brought up, Saranac Lake, New York. I was up there only a couple of weeks ago in terms of when we're recording this in late February for the Carnival Parade. And the parade went right past where you're looking on Broadway. And this picture was taken in the 1920s. And once again, many of the same old buildings in Saranac Lake have been left there and changed. There have been some fires, as there were in other communities. So some of the buildings have been torn down or changed or a story taken off or whatever. But that's the way it looked like in the 1920s. And that's the way it looked like in 1998 when you took this photograph. Here's another great photograph of Saranac Lake. And boy, the before and after pictures look pretty much the same from the 1920s, as you can see there.
That's Broadway looking from Main Street.
Yep, it certainly is. But there are some changes in between, but you can tell it's the same area as you look down that same road today, or as you took this picture in 1998, which would have been about 2 years ago from when we're recording this, right? Oh, those are great shots. All right. Now we're gonna. Whoa, the ghosts are in the house. Something fell in the sink. All right, this is also Saranac Lake, Main Street. Well, looking south.
Yeah, in the 1920s.
In the 1920s, for those people in the High Peaks area. Boy, the building on the right today is still a bank. It looked like it was a bank back then. Marine Midland in this picture in 1997, but I doubt if that's the same. I doubt if that's the same building. Just to give you an idea how things have changed in Saranac Lake in the last almost 80 years, right? Okay. Now, we haven't looked at this one yet, have we?
No.
Okay, let's do that.
That's,
Oh, boy. I love it when I can read some of the signs on the buildings. This was looking north in the 1920s. These pictures might have been taken again on the same roll of film way back when, huh? And you can see the market. That's Tobin's Market. On the left-hand side, Tobin's Market, Saranac Lake. And it's a little bit different today on both sides of the road, but some of the old buildings right down the street are still there. Excuse me as I clear my throat. This is the way the street looked in 1997 when Ron Venne took a ride into the High Peaks to show what Saranac Lake looked like. Well, you've heard us talk about the Notch, haven't you? If you're not from the North Country, you don't know what the Notch is. But boy, if you want to know why they called it the Notch, take a look at this old photograph from the Wilmington area, the Wilmington Gorge, Lake Placid, around when?
1925.
1925. For anybody who drove up the old road way back when, in the wintertime, you know that you took your life in the hands. In your hands, when you were driving, you see those cars back there, they had mechanical brakes. Which meant it was kind of hard to stop going downhill sometimes. And the aspect of that road changes, I remember in the very early 1960s, when the radio station I worked for built a radio station, a sister station, WIRD in Lake Placid, going up through the Notch many, many times.
Yeah.
When you thought you were taking your life in your hands, the visibility was zero, and it's changed a great deal today. It's still one of the most scenic highways in the world. It's a great trip up through the Notch, even though if the road is wider and it's a little bit safer. And a bad day when you go up to a concert or a sporting event at Lake Placid and drive back down in the wintertime when it's a little glazing of ice in there, you do worry a great deal. Oh boy, we're heading on down to Essex County, and where are we now?
steamboat Ticonderoga docks at the 19th century at Port Kent.
Port Kent, New York. Oh boy, is that that area's changed. How did you find that spot to go back there today?
Well, that's where the ferry dock lands farther over.
Farther over, but
Yeah.
the pilings are still there.
Yeah.
From the old landing for the Ticonderoga.
Yeah.
Very historic boat on Lake Champlain. There were a lot of them
Yeah.
that plied the waters of Lake Champlain back then. And Ron, he pretty much found the exact spot, didn't you?
Yeah.
Stood right there so that the picture showed up roughly the same. And you can just imagine if you were to go down there today, when the grass gets green again
Yeah, it
like
gets
that,
green
of
again.
course, that the Ticonderoga was pulling right up there and ready to take on passengers. Wow! Wait till you see this photograph. I've seen this photograph before, but not for many years. I want you to tell me what it is, Ron.
It happened August 1st, 1903. The freight train came from Rouse's Point, New York at 9:30 this morning, and the bridge was open for Jim
Averill.
Averill's boat, and the engine and the 12 cars went into the lake.
Wow! And that was a horrendous mess. Can you imagine the sound that
Yeah.
made when it went off? It says the southeastern line, right?
Right.
And you want to get an idea what it looks like today? There it is. Without the biggest part of the mess, right? Oh boy, I'll tell you. All right, let's move on a little bit. Things have changed a great deal. As our viewers know, Ausable Chasm has been a magnet for tourists, as one of the main things that we have to offer tourists for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Since way back into the mid portion of the 19th century. And that's the main building at Ausable Chasm in 1924. So that was a pretty hot spot
Yeah.
in 1924. Things have changed in so many ways. This is a picture that you took last year of the main entrance building at Ausable Chasm. There have been many changes, way too numerous for me to mention in this particular program, but not the least of which has been severe flooding.
Yeah.
As you know, during springtime and other times of the year, in spring and fall, water down through the Ausable Chasm area can be pretty wild.
Yeah.
And it has done so much over the last years, you know, the worst of it over the last 60 years or so, to demolish the catwalks and the wonderful pedestrian walks that go along this great natural wonder.
Yeah.
So they've had to change things a great deal. The tour has changed immensely over the last couple of years. They even had to change, change from using those fabulous big wooden boats to take people down through Ausable Chasm, and now, as I've mentioned on this program before, they use rubber rafts.
Yeah.
So things have changed a great deal at Ausable Chasm. Well,
Well,
we finished another chapter, and we're going to look at some more things as we continue, maybe looking a little bit at the Hotel Champlain.
yeah.
This will be an extreme pleasure for me. I gave you a teaser at the beginning of this program because we talked about the Hotel Champlain. We've talked many times about how the trolley tracks from the Plattsburgh Traction Company went out there.
Yeah.
Ron has shown us photographs
Yeah.
of the old trolley cars. How did they run on electricity?
Yeah, they ran electric.
Was it an overhead line or was it in the
It was
tracks?
an
Or
overhead line.
it was an overhead
Overhead
line.
line.
Because the trolleys I remember from my childhood, of course I didn't live anywhere near here, were of the long arm of the
Yeah.
trolley going up to maintain contact on a spring arm, right? On the charged overhead line.
Yeah.
Like bumper cars.
Like bumper cars.
Like the bumper cars, and boy, a lot of my youth, you know, things like that do spark my memories. They spark all of our memories of going to the fairs, but I remember Coney Island as a youngster when it was a really hot place back in the 1930s and 1940s. And one of the great pleasures in my life was for us, my dad, to save enough money for us to go and spend a day at Coney Island
Yeah.
on the beach and in the amusement areas. And it was an historic location back then.
Yeah.
And now it's only a shadow of its former self. Well, once again, before we start this segment of the program, I do want to open this delicious little book. And I want you to look at this page. Writing was so charming back in those days. Copywriters today could take a lesson from these people who wrote, we call them copywriters. They're the people who write advertising things. And this is an advertising book for the Hotel Champlain, the peerless lake and mountain resort of the Adirondacks, Bluff Point near Plattsburgh, open from July to October. Every page is replete with photographs, beautiful photographs. We're going to look at some of those that you have in here. Are some taken from this book?
No.
None from this book.
One of them.
Oh. It was and is a great place. If I might use the word delicious to describe a locale, I would describe this place as delicious. I love to drive up there. Fortunately, as a member of the Clinton Community College Foundation, I get a chance to go up there fairly frequently. I've had a lot of family members, friends, and even clients who have attended and do attend school there. And it still is a magnificent place, but way back when, there was a certain splendor. I'm just going to show one photograph near the end here, and then we'll get into your pictures. But this is a great book. If anybody ever has a chance to see this at Special Collections, at the Feinberg Library, see our friend Wayne Miller, and he'll tell you. But this is a picture where my left hand is located of the 26th Infantry. That was at Hotel Champlain on the bluff way back when, to show you that there was a significant military presence. And they were there for a very good reason, to serenade President McKinley. And we've talked about that aspect of the history. And look at those pith helmets that they have on. Huh? They certainly do look like really dress helmets, pith helmets. Oh, I could look at this book for a week and a half, but I'm not going to. But I do want to just read a little bit from the opening page before we begin, because the prose was delightful. The Hotel Champlain on Bluff Point, the most commanding promontory on Lake Champlain, 3 miles south of Plattsburgh, New York, overlooks an unrivaled landscape of mountains, lake forests, and intervale. First opened in 1890, it was at once recognized as a leading summer resort, unequaled in location, construction, equipment, and management. Successful from the first, its original capacity has been nearly doubled. And it goes on to say how there are beautiful roadways, and those roadways driving up from the old Route 9 up onto the bluff were beautiful. They're changed tremendously now, but they're still beautiful. And on the grounds there were 450 acres. And the steamboats on Lake Champlain, including the Ticonderoga, docked right there. The walkway doesn't exist anymore, but you can walk out in the back on the balcony at Clinton Community College today and just imagine what life was like way back then. Oh boy, you got a whole paragraph on this one. Let's take a look at this. Tell me a little bit about this photograph, Ron.
That was the Bluff Point railroad station. That's where the passengers would arrive from the D&H to go to Hotel Champlain.
And not just folks, we had a lot of rich and famous people. We talked about President McKinley, right?
Yeah, president.
Yeah. It says, many of the rich and famous flocked to the hotel during the 1890s into the 20th century, arriving at this Bluff Point station. The train station is gone now. And you found out what happened to it?
What happened to it?
So what happened to it? What happened to it? What does that say?
I found out what happened to the station. The station burned down when 3 or 4 college students were walking along the tracks. It was kind of cold that day, so the college students went into the train station, seen a fireplace, and then they went out and got some wood for the fireplace. They started a fire, but what they didn't know, the fireplace was fake and burned the train station.
Come on! A fake fireplace?
Yeah.
Look at them. They got warm all right, huh?
They got warm.
Oh boy. So now you know why the fire station at Bluff Point isn't there anymore. leave it to you to find out the history. I hope those college students aren't alive anymore. They'll be a little bit embarrassed about what they know. But anyway, that's where it was located. And it was an extremely busy place. Wow. Here's a nice picture. This is local dignitaries, right?
Right.
And this is that same time period that we mentioned before, when President William McKinley, and does anybody, let's try a little Jeopardy on you folks. Who was McKinley's vice president? Does anybody know? Of course we don't. And I would not have known in 1,000 years if I hadn't seen it written here. Garrett Hobart. That is probably one of the most the most forgettable names in American presidential history. Garrison Hobart at the Hotel Champlain. 1897?
97.
Oh boy. I'm trying to imagine what I see in the background. It almost looks like a spray of water,
Yeah.
unless it's a fault on the picture, and I don't think so. I don't exactly know what it might be, but that was 1897. And of course, there are only memories left, including some of those old photographs, because the way it looked when you took this picture in 1997, all you can see is the ghosts of the people who were there way back when. These are good photographs. Some of these I've not seen before. We've talked a great deal about the Hotel Champlain and its rich and colorful North Country history, and you got treated like royalty when you went there, didn't you, way back when?
Yeah.
What are you looking at, a horse-drawn?
Horse-drawn Hotel Champlain bus converts guests at the hotel.
Yeah, it takes them up to the hotel. There are many of those same buildings still exist today, used for various things. A lot of the homes have been kept. Some of them had to be destroyed. The campus has recently been expanded since you took this photograph. We have a brand new technology building, which has recently been opened and is a part of Clinton Community College's history into the age of technology and training people to work at a lot of the high-tech businesses that are moving into this area on and off the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Well, I told you it was a glorious place, and it was. You've seen pictures of hotels, but I don't know if you've ever seen anything quite like this unless you went to Saratoga Springs and looked at some of the glorious hotels from way back when. Because this is the Champlain Hotel at Bluff Point as it looked when? Early 1900s?
May 25th, 1910.
Oh boy,
That's before it burnt.
that's when it burned.
Yeah.
There was a horrendous fire there, and it was horrible. When they rebuilt the building, it didn't take very long.
No.
They knew this was a very popular place, and within, what, 1 year?
1 year.
They were ready for guests again in 1911. It's hard to believe. And have you seen the new photograph? Is that what you're looking at now? Okay. You see, as it looks today, it's undergone many changes, and even this garage over here on the right-hand side of the 1997 photograph is gone.
That's gone.
There have been additions on the other end with a great cafeteria and a wonderful meeting room, and I've always been proud to be a part of Clinton Community College. It undergoes growing pains, as all universities do. Funding is very difficult, but it's been such a wonderful thing for students in the North Country to be a part of Clinton Community College, which had outreach on Plattsburgh Air Force Base and outreach at the Clinton Prison Correctional Facility in Dannemora. Wow, great changes. Okay. Remember when I just mentioned a few minutes ago about the steps, the glorious steps to the rear of the Hotel Champlain? Right? Now there was a stairway there. You could see it.
Yeah.
And what did they call that beach? The Singing Sand Beach. It became world famous. The fact that the sand allegedly made a special sound, and they
Yeah.
called it the Singing Sand Beach, and it was written in books all over the United States and all over the world. Well, unfortunately, things have changed a little bit back there now. If you were to try to walk down those stairs off that back lawn of Clinton Community College, you'd fall down the hill, and you wouldn't keep rolling. You wouldn't stop rolling until you rolled right into Lake Champlain, because it's all overgrown back down there, and the steps are gone. And but you know what? The view back there is still the same. Oh my goodness. Look at these costumes. We talked about the Singing Sand Beach, and your notes tell us that the Singing Sand Beach was a major attraction for guests at the Hotel Champlain in the early 1900s. And look at the boat. You can see the boat houses, the trees, the costumes. Just tremendous costumes with the knickers and leggings. Boy, you're talking about memories of my childhood. Now, things, of course, have changed completely down in the Singing Sand, especially when you took this. I don't know what time of year you took this, but the beach looked a little ragged in 1997, right?
It was like in the spring.
Yep. There's a residential area. There are a lot of homes, and this is prime property along Lake Champlain, and it's getting more difficult to buy for people who would like to go along Lake Champlain. Well, well, well. This was a popular vacation spot way back when, and still is, and we're doing our best every year to attract more tourists to this area, but we're at the dock, aren't we?
Yeah, at the dock in 1900, Hotel Champlain. The original hotel's in the background.
Singing Sand Beach on the right-hand side, just so you can get the perspective of it. You can see the hotel up there and the old car with the lights. And if you look very carefully, on the bottom of that photograph, you can see the name Taft, can't you? President Taft. If you look carefully, I think these trifocals are doing pretty well by me, even though I couldn't tell the word restaurant. I think I see President Taft, and that's President Taft and his company, probably in that actual car right there. Oh, yeah, I get a little aspect there, and I can see it. Now it's completely different today, right? But you can imagine the old car with the president and his entourage there today along that little stretch of beach. It's still a nice place to visit. All right, let's go on down on Route 9. Lots of things were happening in the early days, but you're looking, what are you looking at now?
These are the trees they used to have along Route 9, but then they cut them all down.
Yeah, what a tragedy, because they were there right up into the only very recent past. You've got both photographs now, so you can see what changes have taken place. You can see the golf course on both sides of Route 9 down in that Bluff Point area. This photograph was obviously taken from a vehicle.
Yeah.
And there were a great many beautiful trees in this area way back when, and sadly, a lot of them are gone. Well, we talked about President McKinley. You want to get up close up and personal? Here he is. The president and his wife, Mrs. McKinley, First Lady, stayed at the Hotel Champlain. What year would that have been?
1897.
Much of the summer they were here, right?
Yeah, much of the summer.
And so he was strolling along one of those drives called Green Drive back then, and that makes perfect sense. And this would be the same road that goes into the Bluff Point Golf and Country Club today, and I believe those are the same trees. Did you take this after the ice storm, or?
No, before.
The ice storm was 1998.
Yeah, this is taken in April.
This was taken, so this was taken after the ice storm.
Yeah, after.
You can see that some of the trees are a little bit decimated, but those are some of the same trees that were there when President McKinley stayed there in 1897, which would have been 103 years from now. Oh, I love these old photographs. Your notes say the president spent a lot of time sitting under a big pine at the foot of Green Drive, and there he is sitting there as living proof And I don't know what that would have been on the left-hand side. What is that in the picture you took today? What is
Well,
this thing?
that's a stone where the tree used to be. So they put like a marker there
Oh,
where it used to stay. See?
I wonder if there's a plaque on that marker. Is there anything written on it or not?
I think so. I'm not sure. I'd have to go up there again.
No, you're gonna make me take a little trip up there to find out. Well, that's where the tree was located, huh? You managed to find it.
I found it.
So if you found it, I probably could too.
Another one.
Oh, well, this tells us exactly what happened. I should have known if I stuck around long enough, we'd get the whole history. What happened to that tree?
Was destroyed by lightning in 1902. Less than a year after the president was assassinated. This photo shows the damage done to the tree by lightning in a moment in which erected sometime after 1913 to mark the spot where McKinley's favorite reading and watching spot as
Where?
it looks today.
Now you're going to see as it looks today, when I wondered what that piece of stone was, the monument is still there, and it does still have writing on it, and now you can go up there and take a look at it. I never knew what that was before this very moment.
Yeah.
So hopefully you and the rest of our audience is getting a liberal education as we look at Ron Venne's photographs from his home at 72 Bailey Avenue in Plattsburgh. Now what are we looking at, Ron?
Lake Champlain, looking from Hotel Champlain in 1897.
That was the same year that McKinley was there.
Yeah.
Probably all these photographs. And now the same, roughly the same view today. You do have it, the perspective fairly close, don't
Yeah.
you? You went up, where did you go? Right behind the
Right behind.
college?
Yeah.
And took a look at the photograph. Oh, what a beautiful view that is. In the distance, in the new photograph, you can see the mountains of Vermont.
Yeah.
In the early photograph, it's difficult because,
Yeah,
first of all, it's not in color. Secondly, it's a little bit blurred in the distance. Great pictures. All right. As I said before, that lakeshore was and is pretty busy. We live on a pretty spectacular and sometimes even great lake, Lake Champlain, right? Now, what are we looking at?
This is Lake Champlain looking south from Route 9 along what they call Lake Shore Road.
And the same, roughly the same today. It had a nice little wooden, boy, that's a pretty old photograph that you're showing me here. This photograph was, if that is indeed a photograph, do you believe that's a photograph?
Yeah, I think
I
so.
think so.
Yeah.
That was taken a long time ago when Route 9 was what we would call now a cow path.
Yeah.
But it just happens that Route 9 was a main thoroughfare
Yeah.
back in those days. And the same perspective as it looks today.
That's one of my cuts from that brochure. That was the road that went to the dock from.
All right, take a look at this before and after. The road going to Hotel Champlain from the boat dock. That would be in the early 1900s, and a couple of years ago you went back and took the picture in 1998 to show what it looked like today. Boy, there aren't very many remnants of it left, are there, huh? But you can, the best part of it is you can now see Hotel Champlain.
Yeah.
We should mention, I think, in the process, in case it's not in our series of photographs, that it ultimately became Bellarmine College.
Yeah.
And then was turned into Clinton Community College. Well, we're going back to 1897, I'll bet you. President McKinley, Vice President Hobart, now that we know who he was, seated in a carriage at the dock at Hotel Champlain during the summer. No, we're back. Oh yeah, 1897,
Yeah.
right? All right. Have you got both of them in here? Just the one. Look at those pictures. See the bicycle that the boys got on the right-hand side before they put fenders on bicycles?
Yeah.
A nice looking team. And boy, this guy is dressed to the nines, to use an old phrase, who's holding the horses. Look at his top hat. That's even taller than McKinley's hat. And now, as you stand in roughly the same spot, boy, there isn't much left of it, right?
Right.
Great picture. All right, flipping. Oh, I love these. This almost looks like a picture of the old Wild West. This reminds me of some of the old sheriffs and the old towns. And what the heck are we looking at here?
It's the railroad station at Valcourt. was a favorite spot for young people that hitched a train ride to school in Plattsburgh. In this photograph, workmen and supervisors engaged in building additions to the Jones Platt House await the next train.
The Jonas Platt House, huh? They were building additions to the Jonas Platt House.
Yeah.
So we got workmen and their supervisors and the whole cotton picking crew there with a beautiful guy sitting down with a big mustache and the hats and clothes and oh my goodness. Now that station was located a bit of ways. This was
Yes.
on the Valcour Railroad Station was located on the Lapham's Mills Road.
Yeah.
For those people who would travel up in that direction from Peru. And there isn't much remaining today. How did you know where it was? How did you know where to go?
Well, I got other books that covers different railroads.
Oh, I
Locations
see.
from way back, and it shows a map where the stations were located.
Yeah, in the
At that
original
time.
photograph, you could see where the telegraph office was, because that's where messages were sent by telegraph. If you've never heard the sound of a telegraph or watch a good telegrapher at work, did you ever learn the Morse code?
No, I didn't.
And I know to get my Boy Scout merit badge, long before you were ever dreamed of being born, I had to learn the Morse code, and I don't know how much I learned. Whatever I learned, I've forgotten completely, because I've forgotten a lot of things. But it was a favorite spot for young people to gather. This is truly phenomenal. This is only a small chapter of the life and loves of Ron Venne at 72 Bailey Avenue. He's been interested in so many things.
Yeah.
I thought I was the only person whose mind was sent into 58 million directions. But I think it's sad for a person who lives in a world so small that they don't have the many interests that you and I, Calvin, and many of our viewers have. And perhaps during the course of this series of programs with Ron Venne, we can inspire you to expand your horizons, to set goals farther away than just walking from one end of your house to the other or one end of your street to the other. You have taken us and are taking us on a wonderful trip back in history. And generally when we look at old pictures, or we look at an old history book, that's what we see.
Yeah.
The old pictures, and we can imagine what it was like back then. And sometimes I've been known to take a walking tour to see what that area looks like today.
Yeah.
But thanks to Ron Venne, through the eyes of his camera and now the cameras of Hometown Television with Calvin Castine, we're able to make those comparisons.
Yeah.
I think in this current series we're not going to be able to look at every photograph Ron has done, because there are a lot of different things, and some of them we'll be skimming over rather rapidly.
Yeah.
And not because they aren't interesting, but because I want to get on and get into the next segment of Ron's life, and that will be probably some of the great models, his interest in cars and racing, and he's done paintings, and he's done these tremendous recreations of World War II, mostly World War II,
Yeah,
right?
World War II.
And your interest in World War II, you told me, was because why?
I don't know, it's mostly like interesting for me because you never lived through it at that time. So you like to build like certain things that happened during World War II when
I see.
they were fighting over there.
Have you done reading about World War II, or
Yeah,
just
yeah.
mostly pictures?
No, I did reading about it and stuff like that. And I ordered certain books you can get, but I can't find them now. They used to call them After the Battle. And what they did, they did the same thing what I'm doing. They go back to the same locations now to see what these areas look like today. I got some that covers like Normandy Beach, what that looked like back then when the guys were landing on the beach, and what the beach looks like now. I got some that covers Hitler's headquarters, what those locations look like now. Bridge at Remagen, that with the U.S. Army took over, and then it collapsed after with the guys on it at that time. I got some that covers like the atomic bomb in Japan, what that looked like before and after.
Hiroshima,
Pearl Harbor.
Nagasaki,
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
I'm still trying. It is a fascinating time period, even for those of us who lived through it.
Yeah.
I was a little boy during the Second World Wars. I was born in 1937, so it held a special kind of interest for me.
Yeah.
And of course, everything was huge to me back then.
Yeah.
Everything that happened about the war, the radio broadcasts with Walter Winchell, you know, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea, and Gabriel Heater and the old broadcasters. I can still hear their voices in my mind from the radio wherever it was located in our house. And I can still remember the blackouts, as we've talked about before, and the various things that happened. So it has a different meaning for me than for you, but for both of us, it has tremendous meaning. And it was such a significant war for many reasons.
Yeah.
And the word war took on a different meaning for Americans than it has for Americans today. I think Calvin would agree. If the word glorious could ever be attached to war, for us then it was a righteous cause.
Yeah.
And we all believed in it. And even though now in retrospect some of the propaganda that we actually were led to believe by our own country was ludicrous in retrospect, we got behind the war effort.
Yeah.
This country has always done that until it came to a war called Vietnam. And then our attitude toward war changed a great deal in this country, didn't it? For all the obvious reasons. So you have a lot of memorabilia from World War II. You have books.
I got books. I got
photographs.
I got pictures of my uncles were in the service during World War II. I got gas ration cards, fuel ration cards. Flags used to hang out their window. You know, like if some of their families were over across fighting. I got that. I got some German stuff that I found, you know, from that time there.
We're just whetting your appetite, so you know that one of these days we're going to get to that. And then you started making models at a very young age, and as far as connections to World War II, how many model projects have you made connected with World War II, would you guess?
Well, I did about I don't know, over 50-something dioramas that I built.
Now, when we're talking diorama, we aren't talking about a kid that makes a model of a little Jeep and sets it on the table. We're talking about a diorama. Look it up in your Funkin' Wagnall. You decide on a scene out of your head or out of a picture.
Well, I look through like World War II photographs, pick out certain areas, and some places you might like. Well, then you can look at the picture, then you make the buildings, and then usually the Jeeps or trucks you can get as a kit. And they say you build the kit, you gotta paint it, then weather it, you gotta paint the figures, and then you gotta make your own buildings.
So we're talking sometimes one or two things in the diorama started as a little kit.
Yeah.
And then you kind of
add stuff,
variations to the theme, and add things in the most amazing way. And I'm trying to prepare our listeners for something that Calvin and I have decided, without too much thought, is kind of astounding.
Yeah.
To have done this, because you're one of those people whom I would call a visionary. Not because you can look so far into the future, but because you can, in your mind, create the diorama before you start to build it. And I've seen some of the pictures you've drawn ahead of time, which are very close to being blueprints.
Yeah.
And you've done that for planes and cars and
trolleys, trains,
whatever. And then when he's finished with these dioramas, then he's built plastic boxes to contain them, which of course are transparent, so the viewer can come and if we live long enough, we're going to see to it that thousands of people can come through somewhere, wherever they might be prominently displayed, and look at these dioramas. But in the meantime, we're doing the next best thing, because this young man has been gracious enough to invite us into his home and take several hours of his time every week to talk to us about what his passions are. And one of those passions is building those diorama, along with various other models of all kinds. So those will be segments of the Ron Venne stories next time. This makes 4 of them we've done, right?
Yeah.
So next time will be number 5. I don't think, we've done series of programs before, but I don't know if we ever did 5, did we?
Yeah.
Not, not yet. Before this program was born, what seems like ancient history now, around the 4th or 5th month of 1997, there was another program done with the late Ron Venne. And thanks to the magic of taking the old tapes and scheduling them on our programs, many of our viewers are able to see the well over 500 programs called What's Going On Here that Ron Venne did. And he was Bob Venne, not Ron Venne. Bob Venne, who was, what, your cousin?
Cousin.
A cousin of yours. And that's how we originally made the connection. But Bob was just a phenomenal human being, and we've talked about him many times. And for Teresa and his family and the rest of us who knew him and loved him, and Calvin no more than Calvin, because he worked with Calvin for years and years, it's good to refresh our memories.
Yeah.
And it's these 500, and how many, did you ever count them all? More than 500 programs that Bob Venne did with Calvin Castine are his legacy, along with all the little children that he gave gum to out of his pocket, and all the flea markets that he attended, and all the things that he did to endear himself to people in his community in the great North Country. And you're a living tribute to the Venne name, Ron. And I can't wait till we come back here next time and do Chapter 5 of the Ron Venne story. And I can't even end the program by saying who knows where we're going to be next time, unless Calvin finds some place for us to go between now and next week. We'll do it again from Ron Venne as we continue with this great series of programs on Our Little Corner.